I'm sorry I made you cry the other day.
Oh, that's okay. It's not completely your fault anyway. I'm going through some personal problems.
Really? What do you got?
Well, I'm 5 months pregnant. My editor's the father. He's married, but not to me.
Wow, that's a rough ticket. You know, my first wife left me when I was your age.
What's deep search?
My submarine.
I had this exact image of you tacked up on the wall above my aquarium all through primary school.
Oh, yeah? You mean the official photograph where I'm doing this?
That's the one.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's just me, but I don't feel like that person. I never did.
Why did you abandon Ned?
I didn't. I never even met him. What kind of piece are you writing, Cubby?
You've landed on The Substance. I'm your host, Philip Marinello, saying welcome back and almost Merry Christmas. Here at The Substance, we're looking to have conversations that help us all better appreciate goodness, truth, and beauty. Previous guests on the show include folks like Film Spotting's Josh Larson, New York Times film critic Alyssa Wilkinson, multi-hyphenate artist Propaganda, Mike White of the Projection Booth podcast, and actor-director John Carroll Lynch. This week, I am so excited to share with you our Substantive Cinema episode on The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, featuring special guest Dan McCoy. This is a movie I love and have loved for a long time, and Dan is somebody who I have listened to for years and years. He's one of the hosts on the Flophouse. It's one of my favorite movie podcasts, so this was one I've been looking forward to for quite a while. I recorded it a few months ago while we were kind of in transition on previous editor to now. So I am so excited to be sharing this with you all now. We had a great conversation. While The Life Aquatic is a very silly and fun Wes Anderson movie, it's also very substantive. We talk about themes like mortality and legacy, and Dan gets personal and goes deep. I am not the youngest of men. He's a few years older than myself, and we talk about getting getting to the midpoint of a life and kind of looking at it and examining things. And the movie also has a bit to say about personal growth and how a lot of times significant personal growth often looks like small changes. And we talk about a whole lot more. This was a wonderful conversation, and I am so excited to share it with you all. And before we get into it here, quick reminder, if you value the show, if it's something that you enjoy, something that you like, we'd ask that if you're not driving, take a quick second. You don't even have to hit the pause button. Pull up the menu. If you haven't yet, hit the 5-star button. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you would write a sentence or two, quick review to let folks know what you like about the show. It really does help more people find the show, and we appreciate it. So a big thank you to everyone out there who does that. And without further delay, here is my conversation with Dan McCoy on The Life Aquatic. Well, Dan McCoy, welcome to The Substance.
Thank you. This is you show a lot of I don't want, like, now I'm like I'm censoring myself. I'm like, what words can I say? There's a lot of
you be you. Say
there's a lot of balls shown into like naming your thing The Substance. Like to put it right up front, like we are only going to talk about matters of importance here.
Not only. That's just the vibe we have, because we talk about all sorts of movies, like, and looking for, not like putting it where it isn't, but I mean, we've covered, we love genre stuff here too. So it's like, why do we love the movies we love? What is the beauty? What is the resonance? Like the things that really hit us? Like we've done
like the original Godzilla. We've done The Thing. We've done a lot of horror and thriller stuff where it's like, what is it about these things that resonate with us more than just that was fun entertainment, which is also not bad at all.
No, that's a good way. Whatever lingers. If something lingers with you,
Yes.
it probably has something extra going on.
Which the pick today was perfect. When we talked about, when I initially reached out to you and you very graciously were open to it, and we talked about a couple titles. When you brought this one up, I was like, yes, that's such a good one. Because this is one, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. It's one that I come back to a lot in my mind. I don't rewatch it all the time and as often as some others. But I mean, you just said like lingers. Like this is one that maybe lingers with me the most of his work.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it has had a long tail culturally in the sense of people turned around on it, at least.
Sure.
Like when it first came out, it sort of baffled people. Like I think this was like the first sort of serious Wes Anderson doubting was, people loved Rushmore, which had some of the style, but because it had less of a budget, maybe it couldn't go as far as he would want to push it later. And it felt
Sure.
like this scrappy human-sized story. And then Royal Tenenbaums was kind of a broad hit. And then
Yeah, it was huge.
This came out. And
I mean, when did that come out? Like that made Royal Tenenbaums made nearly $100 million. Like that was a big hit. And I think that even got some nominations.
Yeah, I think Hackman was nominated for it. I think that was the year that I was disappointed he didn't get it because I thought he's so amazing in that movie. But then, yeah, this movie I think was the beginning of people getting
divided.
Confused and divided on Wes Anderson. Like now, I have friends or I know people who seem mad at new Wes Anderson movies, and honestly, at this point, like I can understand why that's not a flavor for you. That's
Sure.
fine. Like
you don't have to like it.
But at this point, you know what it is. So if it's like someone who has a shellfish allergy, like blaming the lobster.
Exactly.
Like, you knew what
it's an established brand. Like it's not some new upstart with his first movie. So I guess that's a good place to start. Like where were you on Anderson? When did you come on his work? Were you there for Bottle Rocket or did you come on with Rushmore?
Rushmore. I caught up with Bottle Rocket later, but Rushmore was sort of like a movie that I liked already, and then my first wife we had our first date, we watched it, so like it stuck in my head as a significant movie for me for that reason, and then loved Royal Tenenbaums, and I liked this movie when it first came out. I definitely really liked it, but I also did share a little bit of kind of the confusion about it because it's a confounding
it is
movie. Like
tonally, he doesn't hold your hand.
Yeah, there's a lot of heartbreak and a lot of comedy, and it's all presented at the same sort of deadpan level.
It's all very deadpan.
Yeah, and there for the first time these fantastical elements,
and
it's also the closest he's done to like an action movie. It has like adventure qualities to it, and like even now there's stuff in it, as much as I love it, that I'm like, I'm not sure that totally works or whatever. Like it's kind of misshapen in the way that some of the most lovable things are imperfect, but I keep coming back to it and finding stuff in it, and it lingers with me, and it might be my favorite at this point, even though in a weird way, like watching it, I might get bored more often than like
there are definite stretches where you go, I don't know if these are the wrong choices, but like it's odd. Like it definitely, because it is so many different interests and fascinations of Wes put together in one movie. It's like, oh, this would be interesting if this happened, and then this, and then this. Like the tonal shifts really are, I don't even know if jarring is the right word. It feels like uneven. Like the movie, like you're never really like have your 2 feet set on, okay, this is what we are. Because then in 10 minutes, something will happen and be like, oh, I guess it's this kind of thing now.
Yeah. And it has some of the harder to like. I mean, Zissou mostly. Like, I feel like his other movies may have prickly characters or whatever, but they're sort of more immediately either like Royal Tenenbaum is a piece of work, but he has so much flair that it's kind of easy to also love him. Whereas uh, Zissou is such a sad jerk in a lot of ways. Like
He really is. Like when we come on to him, so when the movie opens up, he's in a slump in his career. He's in a slump in his marriage. Like his crew's faith in him is not like it's very much teetering. He's not sure if he can get financial backing for his next movie. His best friend just died. Like he is not in a good place for the movie.
And what's
like, when we
more,
come
like,
on to him.
yeah, I mean, and that's the stuff, honestly, because he's an underdog, like, does make him more lovable. But then in his interpersonal relationships, like, you grow to see how much he cares for the crew, and there's some very key moments later on. But I think, like, for so much of the movie, he is so relentlessly selfish out of this kind of fear of his own fading power in the world. Like his pursuit of Cate Blanchett in the movie is so like he's such an asshole in the course of that.
Like he calls dibs on her,
Yeah,
basically. Like
and
when she's clearly like pregnant and there for work.
yeah, and he allows it to mess with his relationship with the surrogate son, and he seems entitled. He feels entitled to this romance because he thinks of himself as a big deal, as he has been.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he is rejected, he acts out like such a big baby.
Yeah.
So like there are these really terrible parts about him, but then I don't know, you see the warmth in moments where when the pirates come in and he's like gently, like he says, don't point a gun at him, he's an unpaid intern. Which is a funny line, but it feels like he's like, well,
He's
at
being
the
protective.
least, yeah, like this guy didn't sign up for this, come on, man. And he cares. He does care about the people. So it's a movie, I think, that might be difficult, though, to get back to kind of what set us off, because it is about personal growth, but it's such a small personal growth, and it comes at a really high price.
Yeah. Like, so I mean, I don't want to jump all the way to the end, but I had forget, like, there are no, like, the arcs in this movie are so scattershot and short, like, because the movie is called The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. He's the main character, and like you said, his growth is small, but there is also something very human and poignant about that when a couple different things towards it, like the last 20 minutes of this for me. So I mean, I also liked it when it came out, but it has really grown in my estimation over the years. And I've said for the last couple, I mean, I guess when Asteroid City came out, it bumped something out, but I think my top three are Asteroid City now, Darjeeling Limited, and then this. But whenever I watch this, I go, oh man, this might be my favorite. Like Tenenbaums, this, and Darjeeling are a really interesting trilogy of like Wes working out family stuff. And I think that'd make a really interesting triple feature.
Yeah. I have not seen Darjeeling, I think, since it came out, so I couldn't speak to that part of it, but it does seem, I mean, I do remember that like there's so many family themes that I just realized I don't know anything really about Wes Anderson the man, other than he wears corduroy suits. And
yeah, no, he's very peculiar. Yeah, like he's a Texas kid. He grew up like a theater guy. He's best friends with Owen Wilson. And yeah, like I don't know a ton about his biography. I think his parents did divorce when he was young-ish. And that's come up a lot. And I also just realized the other day, kind of just thinking about things through the lens of like those three movies, that Anjelica Huston was the prominent female in all three of those families, thereabouts, or at least in the movie, because Zissou, she was his second wife. I love that every time. I love the gag with the tattoo and the submarine with the name crossed out and then the new one on. Like,
yeah, I mean, like this really is where it started to be like he had the resources to put in so much business, and he, you rewatch a movie like this, and I know people find it fussy, but I think it's such a treat that there's all these other things happening in the frame that maybe you won't notice right away, but it is always alive with detail. And some people, that strikes as like, oh, it's a beautiful object that is keeping you at a distance, and I do get that. But as maybe someone who is inclined toward esoteric fascinations and has a lot of pent up emotions, I appreciate a movie about pent up people who have a catharsis at some point.
yeah. I mean, every now and then, like, I'm sure, as we all probably need, I'm sure I probably could benefit from talking some of these things out in therapy, but like every now and then I'll just throw the last 15-20 minutes on and just like feel something. Like the last 15-20 minutes are absolutely perfect.
Yeah, this is a movie that will not fail to make me cry at the end. There are a few ones that I know, just like clockwork. The end monologue of Raising Arizona will also do it to me every single time. But I actually threw this question. I mean, this is like, I don't know whether we're getting to it too early, but this is like the key thing for me. Like the ending of this movie, I threw the question out to sort of my own podcast and was like, why does this affect me so much? Because the elements of it seem so odd and like they wouldn't like what's the power they're holding that
Yeah, that's
this
a good thing to
man
examine. Yeah,
goes down with his friends in a submarine, sees a beautiful shark, says, I wonder if it remembers me, and then I
the
fall
song
apart.
the song and the line. So I mean, so let's save a little bit of this for the end.
Yes.
But yeah, no, this I watched that again right before recording, and I didn't get through the whole thing, but I was like, oh man, I better stop before I lose control here. So the movie opens up where he's very clearly like a Jacques Cousteau amalgam.
Yeah.
I listened to, I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know if you say it or if it's letters and it's an acronym for something, but there's a podcast feed, GIBOP, that just has commentary tracks like every day.
Oh, wow.
They release commentary tracks like just in audio for podcasts. So a couple days ago, just on a whim, I searched, I was like, oh, I wonder if they have Life Aquatic. So I just put it on while I was driving around today and listened to I said Coppola. No. Noah Baumbach and Wes Anderson just talk about this. And it was really funny because I don't know what the deal was, if they were doing this to be cute or if they or Criterion recommended it, but they actually recorded the commentary track in the Italian restaurant that they wrote the movie. And you can hear like people ordering in the background and people lighting cigarette. Like you can hear like the flick of the cigarette lighters, like a Lil Wayne song, like every now and then, or like people putting down coffee cups, but they're just talking. It's meandering, but it's really good. And they basically said, yeah, Steve Zissou is basically Jacques Cousteau and Bill Murray, actually, like slapped together. And I was like, okay, I can see that. Like the stuff that he brings to it. And that's so interesting because he kind of did that in Rushmore too, where if you are either lightly or deeply involved in pop culture and care about it, like you can bring that bit of background, either his career and his personal life and the ups and downs, like you can kind of put that into the character too. So like you don't even have to, but if you're familiar with any sort of like recent cinematic history, like that kind of even adds a bit of a layer.
Right. I mean, well, with Murray, the thing for me is like, unfortunately, we've come to learn that
Yeah.
he's not such a nice man in ways that we don't need to get into, but his screen persona has always been so incredibly charming that, like, the value of having someone like him is that you will like this guy, because he just brings that. I was actually just right before this, I was watching an episode of The Good Place with my wife. We decided to start rewatching it. We're still right at the beginning.
Did you really?
Yeah,
We started rewatching
uh,
that like 4 or 5 days ago as well.
well, yeah, it's happening. It's
The
a
best.
wave. But what I was saying about that is like, oh, like this really shows the value of having someone like Kristen Bell in this role right at the beginning, where
Yeah.
she's a scumbum because she has so much personal charm and lovability that you're going to be with her in spite of there's something to play against the sourness of the character. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of Murray here. I just want to say about with Jacques Cousteau, watching it at first, I'm like, I sort of assumed that this film festival that he was at, that this was just some like Wes Anderson whimsy, that that this guy would be the sort of documentarian who like plays these like film festivals or whatever, and that Wes stuck it in because then this character's a filmmaker and he's a filmmaker, and
exactly. I mean, there's
like,
plenty of like making a movie. Like I didn't even think about that for years. Like, oh, this is also like a film about filmmaking a little bit too.
No, totally. And I thought that was why it was in there. I mean, I guess that is why it's in there, but I was surprised to learn that though Jacques Cousteau only made 2 full-length movies before then becoming a long-running, television fixture with his underwater world, like I think the first one won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and it was like the only documentary to have won until Fahrenheit 9/11 did it again. And so it's just it has a kernel of truth there that like he was at the the Cannes Film Festival with his stuff.
No, I love the opening at the festival, and that's probably one of the first. You talked about deadpan. I feel like because we talked about this before we recorded. Letterboxd is great and has almost entirely replaced IMDb for me, but I do occasionally will go on and check the quotes pages, and like every page of quotes on the IMDb quotes for Steve Zissou, it's like, man, that's a killer line. That was a great delivery. But the first big like bomb for me was when they asked the question and the guy translated it like, what would be the scientific purpose of killing the fish? Long pause, really long pause. Revenge, like just of course, like, and that kind of sets the tone for like the comedy in the movie, because there's a lot of laughs, but it's not like, oh, this is a hilarious joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's all wry, which I guess is like also a barrier for entry for a lot of people, because like if it's comedy that's never gonna like really raise your pulse,
Sure.
Some people are like, well, this isn't funny.
Yeah, it's all very flat.
Yeah, I think it's very funny, but
it's very
true. You're not. It's not gonna be like bust a gut comedy pick,
Well, at the film festival, also, it kind of throws you off because at this point, this is I haven't rewatched Rushmore in several years. Owen Wilson, he helped write it, but he's not in Rushmore, right?
Unless he maybe has a cameo. Briefly in it as he's wait, I thought no, that's Luke Wilson. Luke Wilson is the date. I don't think he is in it. Yeah.
So I mean, when we're introduced to Owen Wilson, who plays a very important role in the movie, he raises his hand to ask a question, and he's got this like not quite Daniel Craig detective accent, but he's got like a very goofy put on accent that like we all know is not his. And this was something I learned on that the podcast commentary track as well, that Wes was looking for something, just like a thing to put on the Ned character. And one day he said he and Owen were like having lunch or something, and Owen was telling him some story on the set of Armageddon, and was doing an impression of, and I'm dropping his name now, the coach from Remember the Titans, Will Patton.
Oh yeah, that's him.
From Armageddon, and like he had like this crazy accent in that movie, and he's like, well, and like it just amused Wes. And he goes, "Could you do the whole movie like that?" Actually, like it just triggered his brain. He goes, "That's the perfect like affect that character needs." And he's like, "Okay." So that was like an on the spot just thing that was added.
And it's, I mean, I could see that being controversial because when I first saw this movie, there are a few things I bumped up against a little harder than other things. And I think one of them is Owen Wilson's performance, because it is such a like cartoony accent, really, coming out
Very
of a
much
man
so.
that we know doesn't talk that way. But now maybe I have Stockholm syndrome. Who knows?
It's so
Now,
sweet, like it's so like warm and inviting, and like it's
yeah.
obviously put on, but it's
Well,
tender, it's endearing.
it has the quality of. I mean, you could argue also that Owen Wilson is too old for playing the kind of the role that he's playing in this movie, like this sort of wide-eyed, like
Like just
impressionable,
out of
like
like, yeah, he's a fresh
son.
pilot, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it helps it with this boy's adventure feeling of like, okay, this is like an old
Like, aw
timey,
shucks, like.
yeah, and I think it works on that level. But it took me a while to get around to that.
So Owen Wilson approaches Steve at the the after party for this documentary that the movie he actually played like was kind of a failure because his one of his crewmates died and the movie was unfinished, and he still played it at the festival. Like that's maybe supposed to be a little bit funny in and of itself, but
Yeah.
Owen Wilson, his character Ned, introduces himself to Steve at the after party for this film festival. Like, hey, my mom died and I think I might be your son, basically.
Yeah.
And another great deadpan moment of Steve going like, oh, okay. And like going to his wife, basically telling her this whole thing while Ned is standing right there and she doesn't know who he is. Like that moment makes me laugh every time too.
Yeah. And I think it's, I mean, we will later learn that he has known about Ned for, since Ned's been born. And while Ned is probably not actually his son from what we learn later on, he has deliberately not been in touch, which undoes about what I'm going to say a little bit. But I think that it does. You like Steve because when he's presented with this, he's a little caught off guard, but he doesn't try and avoid it or anything. Like he's like, oh, okay, like, and he actually sort of, as the movie goes on, enthusiastically embraces it. And part of, like the push pull of like the sweet and the sour of it is that he is kind of mostly wanting to be a dad now because he's grasping at one last way of having a legacy. uh he seems to like the idea of Ned for some selfish reasons, but we'll get to it. But I feel like at the key moment you see that he has changed.
Well, and it's so interesting too because you talked about like how he's both like kind of a jerk but also very lovable. Once he is like initiated into the crew, Steve basically sits down and says, hey, like, have you ever thought about like changing your name? Like, I'd maybe like to give you my name. And he's got like the sweetest response. Like Owen Wilson's like eyebrow raise and smile. It's so big. And then he's like, well, I like mine. And he goes, oh, no. Like, I just meant my last name. But if you wanted to, like, if I would have had a chance, like, I would have named you Kingsley. Like, it's just such a good exchange. And he's like, well, I think I'll take Ned. And then he orders him the stock, like Kingsley Zissou, like
Yeah.
parenthesis Ned. Like, he wants it, but also kind of on his terms. And like
Yeah.
as viewers, we can both see the growth and then also put our own, like we all have our own experiences with parents and parental figures and various pros and cons. Like we can see like, oh, Steve's trying, but also like we can see the flaws as well. And we kind of also love him because he's more of a whole person. Like he's not like the knight in shining armor, but he's trying.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I think that the humanity of the full character makes you love him.
So then they decide to hold on, because it's not, the plot is important. Like it is, like the
it's
events lead
interesting.
into each other, but you're like, wait, what happens in what order? And it
No,
does happen, but because it's not a traditional, they go here and then they go there and then they do this thing. Like
I just watched it and I had forgotten all the stuff that goes on sort of before they go out to sea, because you get a little bit more of like, Steve's in
oh, the
financial
inheritance.
trouble.
So Ned funds the
Yeah.
expedition because Steve ran out of money, and because of Ned's mother's suicide and his inheritance, that's what funds the actual voyage.
Yes, and like there's like these scenes of the bond company stooge has to come with them now.
Man, I loved on this viewing. I loved the Bond Company stooge.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, like that's sort of the movie, I guess, in a microcosm too, is like you're talking about the humanity of Steve. Like they give all of these characters sort of more dimensionality than you would expect. Like the whole point of the Bond Company's huge character is that Steve doesn't want him there because he thinks he's just there, like as a money man, a
Yeah, to like
soulless,
narc on
like
him to make sure that he doesn't.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the Bud Court is like, no, I'm a human being, and
He's so happy. Like as soon as they get in the elevator, he's like, who knows? Like maybe in the world, like he used to be a Steve Zissou van, or his kids grew up in it, or whatever. But like, he's not like a pencil pusher. He's like, oh yeah, like I get to be a part of this. And that's another thing about Wes's movies in general. But I'm particularly this one, and maybe some others. But like, they're an actual team. Like his movies have such a deep sense of community, and I think that that's something that, I mean, especially resonates with me like post COVID. Like all of our communities have kind of been disrupted, so like to see, I mean, all these broken and people at various levels of growth like really coming together to support each other like for a goal, like there is something really touching about that, and as viewers, like we buy into that.
yeah, yeah, and I think that that's also where a lot of the filmmaking stuff probably comes in for Wes, where you get these sort of ramshackle temporary work families, that are all working together towards something. Yeah, it's very sweet.
Well, and then so Cate Blanchett, before they go, the other big aspect of this that is, so she is writing a piece on him that his investors feel like they need that for the press, but then come to find out, like she's working out her own attachment issues because she's about to be a parent and she's not sure, like the parents and the families in the group, like this is a very strong, like this has those themes a lot more stronger, like kind of on inspection this viewing. It's like, man, like this is really going through this. I don't know if Wes was thinking about having kids or what. Like I don't know what he was going through personally when he wrote this movie, but this is maybe his strongest family movie, even though his movies deal with that all the time, I feel like.
Yeah, although it is also,
Oh,
again,
this and Tenenbaums.
it's so sad, and I mean, we'll get to what happens with Ned, but like the other big thing I sort of bumped up against with this movie is how sort of cruel it is that Ned, seeks out this father figure who probably isn't his father, uh, who takes advantage of him as much as he also cares for him, and then Ned ends up how he does on a trip that, like, Anjelica Huston's like, don't take him, like this is a bad idea. It's a it's a sad thing because it's like, well, Ned's life would have been better if he had never gotten mixed
Yeah.
up in this. And it almost, I think the first time I saw it, unbalanced the movie for me. But I'm
Very
jumping
much so.
ahead of
Like, I
myself.
did not like that the first time. I was like, what is this choice?
Yeah,
And they talked about it on the track, like a number of the producers, like they had to really stand their ground because a lot of people were like, you can't do that.
yeah. Well, I have my theories on that, but we'll get to it later, I guess.
So yeah, and then so with the introduction of Jane, so the reporter Jane comes, there's not quite a love triangle, but like Steve just decides he's interested in her. She and Ned kind of have a mutual potential interest that kind of develops too. Like the scene where Ned is walking through the ship and he hears her reading to her unborn baby. Like that's such a touching scene. Like it
Yeah.
goes from weirdly funny to mean to touching to like, oh wow, like this is really like beautiful artistry. I don't know if I forgot or just learned the first time, but I saw that all of these stop motion creature and underwater animation was Henry Selick. And
Oh
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
whoa. Like he's working with the best in the business. Like I always am amused by and love the animation, but I saw the credit this time and I was like, oh man, like that's why it's so great.
Yeah. No, that was actually the flavor of nerd I am. That was one of the many things enticing me. I'm like, wait, Wes Anderson plus there's stop
Oh, did you
motion
know
by
about
Henry.
that going into it?
I did.
I mean, if
I
I had
mean,
Henry Selick working on my movie, I would definitely be banging that drum on the press trail.
yeah, for the nerds like you or I
Yeah.
who it'll mean something to.
Henry Selick did the seahorses in this movie, guys.
You don't understand. Yeah, but I
So,
mean, obviously it works on some of us.
but I mean, you have all these scenes, like the amalgam of all these things, and like you said, we can argue how well it actually is, but it's clear why some of these things are maybe a little discordant for some
Mhm.
viewers, or why I've read a lot of letterbox logs from my friends who like second or third or fourth viewing, they're like, oh, like now I like this, or they logged it several years ago and then they logged it again recently and go, oh, like now I get it, like with a
Yeah,
little bit more age, with a little bit more experience, like maybe a little bit more kindness to Steve, because like Steve both kind of sucks, but also he's having a hard time. His marriage is hard. He's got financial and work problems. His best friend died. He's probably depressed. Like he's going
yeah,
through a hard time. So like maybe in my 30s it's easier to be more understanding than in my teens.
yeah. No, it is true. Well, I mean, if you see it young enough, you have no moral sense at all.
Sure.
Then you just think he's funny. No, I do think it is easier to sympathize with him after, I don't know, going through a few of your own failings in life and thinking like, gee, I would sure like it if someone gave me some the
Yeah, some
benefit of the
grace, some
doubt.
generosity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, no, it's sweet that way. I think, even though, man, it is funny. It is a movie that has, well, wildly discordant tones, and it only seems to get better every year.
This is one that I probably will add to my more regular watching, because I watched it twice in the last couple weeks for this, and I was like, this one needs to be on more rotation. I want to talk about a few of the other crew members or just the various cast, but the scene, another one that really got me this time, especially when it's paralleled in the documentary footage at the very end of the movie where he's back at the film festival, but the scene in the air balloon with Steve and Jane, where she's basically admitting to him like, you were my childhood hero. Like after he tries to kiss her, like being weird. Like he's kind of sympathetic about her pregnancy and her job, and then he goes in to kiss her. So like he's
Yeah,
trying to be cool. then he's kind of terrible, and then she's like, you were like my hero. Like, I used to have your picture. And he's like, oh, when I was like doing this, and just, and like she like tells him to tweak it a little bit, and you can see her like being a little girl going like, no, like do it like this, and like that doing something for like we learn later in the movie, like she took this assignment herself. Like, Steve's not a hot commodity. This isn't going to be like, not every
Yeah.
magazine or newspaper is like, oh, we need the scoop on the next Zissou documentary, because it's like the last one was kind of a train wreck. Nobody's funding him. Like, his maybe son, but probably not, is funding this expedition with
Yeah.
an inheritance that he just got. That's like pretty exploitative. Like, and she's just like, she's having her own moment of reckoning with, oh, like meeting your heroes.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't. I'm like, sometimes I freeze up. I'm like, I don't know if I have anything to say about that.
No, and it's just moments like that as a viewer, I think just are so relatable, and like the stickiness. Like, these are the things that resonate. Like, that moment resonated so hard with me, and we'll talk about the end in a little bit, but like moment after moment, the final thing is so perfect. But when that's mirrored in the documentary footage where Steve and Ned are both doing the Zissou pose, like I'm like weeping.
Oh man, see, like these are things that I, having seen it multiple times, didn't think about the significance of seeing that again. And yeah, that's why I like something as sort of jam packed as this. Even if it seemed, I think that probably, to go back to people, sort of re-reviewing it on Letterboxd or whatever. Part of it too, I think, is like, look, I think I'm a pretty adventurous film goer. If anything, I prefer, because I've seen so many movies, I want movies to show me something different.
Which
I want.
I'll say sidebar, which I love about your Letterboxd
Thanks.
reviews. I'd say like the Dan McCoy 3.5 stars is one of the highest recommendations for me. Like, all the stuff you do on your show, I maybe about 25 to 40%. Like, I'll check out you guys did get me. I almost checked it out the other day on Hoopla, because it was just added to Hoopla, but I'm a little curious about Mafia Mama. I've gone back and forth, but I think you guys sold me on that. But I love the range of stuff that you intake. And I mean, just kind of like what we do here with some of the stuff, like finding the good in attempts.
Yeah, and I mean, the 3.5 star review for me often is a movie that I would have liked to like feel like I could have even gone higher on, but fear, the world turning against me. And
You gave Ghoulies 2 4 stars.
but I like something that's like maybe a little stranger or willing to play with tones, in part because I've seen enough normal stories that you get kind of bored of it. Like, even with that sort of like background, I didn't know what to make of a lot of this movie the first time around. And I think that movies like this kind of teach you how to watch them, but it takes a whole viewing sometimes so you don't walk like, you kind of knowing what to expect a little bit helps over time.
Yes.
Like, you can assess what it's actually doing rather than being confused because it's not like what you would think it was doing.
No, absolutely. It's one that I'm sure it could work for somebody on a first watch, but this is one that really does reward the rewatch, and like, just maybe not studying, but like really kind of giving it a more thoughtful, careful eye.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I was a little surprised on my 2 recent viewings was how little screen time Willem Dafoe had for how big he is in my head when I think
Yeah.
about this movie. I love Klaus. Like, honestly, maybe top 3 Willem Dafoe performance for me.
He's such a funny guy because Willem Dafoe can be the most terrifying man you've ever seen,
Yes.
or he can be the most lovable and funny.
And he's kind of all that in this movie. Like, he is unsettling. Like, when he starts calling Ned Sonny Boy, like, you're like, what is this guy gonna do? Like the first time you watch it, you're like, is this guy like unwell?
I mean, I think Klaus benefits from having such a clear sort of character game to play. You know, like this idea that he is so attached to Steve. He looks up to Steve so hard, you know, like
Oh
as
yeah, like he looks at him like, I mean, we're talking like the father figures and the familiar stuff. Like Klaus kind of looks at Steve like a father figure when they are much closer in age
Mhm.
and in lifestyle, like
Yes.
in period of life than Ned.
Yes, and you know, his feelings of being threatened when Ned comes in, you know, always very funny, and then it's heartwarming how he turns around on Ned, but like it's such a clear thing, but it doesn't turn into just a cartoon stereotype because it's also so specific, as you said. Like he has these very weird qualities as well.
Well, and his line reading, I mean, honestly, there are so many, but one of my like the movie quotes, I don't say it all the time, but it does occur to me like when various like things happen in life, the thanks for not picking me. Like that's just such like, it's petty, it's funny, but it's also like he's hurt a little bit, but like he wants to bring it up, but also not really. Like
Yeah.
it's he plays it so well. And on this one, I was also like on the heartwarming kind of like, oh man, like that's kind of deep. When they were watching the old tapes, it's a really simple line reading. I wrote it down. He said, it's like, that's what it used to be like. Like when they were watching the old tapes of the old documentaries just one night on the
Yeah.
ship, like the reveling in the memories of like the golden age of it, where he also had like the taxi driver haircut. Like he's there like on the fake icebergs diving in, but like they're all there just kind of going, oh, like remember the old days, and it's touching.
Yeah. I mean, that also as a theme hit me harder. I mean, look, I still got a lot of life, guys. Don't count old Danny boy out. Uh, Dan's still here, everyone. But but you know, I'm 45, and uh, the podcast is well loved by many, but it's been around a long time, you know, and the I no longer work at the most popular thing that I would have been associated with, the Daily Show. Like it is easy at a certain age to feel like obviously we all must fade, but like you don't want it to happen yet, and you're like, is it happening? Is it happening right now? And so much of the Life Aquatic is about a character who's feeling that fade in real time, and what's most painful to watch, you know, I think, is him acting out because of it. His like pettiest, most selfish, most childish stuff, you know. I'm like, oh God, does that also? I'm like, I'm doing that too. I'm sure, you know. I don't know. I just got very. I'm making myself sad. No, not really. But,
Well, and that's the
I don't know
beauty
whether I
of
can pull
cinema.
this car into the garage. Is what I'm trying to say. I guess.
No, like that's the beauty of cinema is you can, if you desire to, like they reflect reality, they reflect life, they reflect truth and beauty, and we don't have to be um, documentarians or oceanographers or explorers to kind of go to kind of know what that feels like, to be like, oh, I I once was this and now I'm like, am I still that? Like that's
Yeah.
a human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, to me, that's sort of one of the biggest themes that jumped out this time around.
Well, and with Klaus, when you want new blood, new people, new ideas, but then sometimes like it's easy to feel threatened. Like, and Klaus's whole
Yeah.
arc when he, before, I mean, we can talk about other things. Just definitely want to talk about the music for sure. But I mean, when Klaus talks to Ned before they go up in the helicopter. And he's like, I really appreciate when you redesigned the Team Zissou logo that like I'm featured prominently. He goes like, yeah, no problem. He goes, no, like I really appreciate that. I don't think you understand. Like that means a lot to me. And he's like, almost, he's like, yeah, no. And that's the full circle moment going from like, be careful,
Yeah.
Sonny boy, or like, who's Kingsley Zissou? Like, to like, thank you and I accept you.
Yeah. No, it's really touching. Yeah. It makes Ned's death all the sadder.
So yeah, let's talk
how
about
about
it. They go up in the
let's
helicopter, and this is the second time, probably more, but I mean the second time we see an on-screen helicopter trip after they both say helicopter's not safe. Ned says, I'm
yeah.
not really licensed for this. Steve's just kind of devil may care, like flying by the seat of his pants. He's like, go, 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 and then fatal
Well,
crash.
I found it very interesting this time around that like I do think that the movie knows it would be so much more unforgivable that Steve took this man's money, took him out on the sea knowing he can't swim among other things, took him up in a dangerous helicopter, and he dies. You know, like I think it would be a lot harder without what I had forgotten was in there, which is that like Ned really insists that they go on this last trip to look for
Yes.
the shark, you know, which is in some ways
Well, and if you're watching the movie for the first time, it's very unclear whether the jaguar shark is real. Like he talks about
mhm,
it, but I mean, Steve is not reliable in a lot of ways. He's definitely in crisis. And another good joke at the beginning is like, "You've got crazy eye." Like you don't know, like, is he all there? Did he like what happened? It's not like did Steve do anything
yeah,
nefarious with Esteban? It's just like, was it just an accident? Did he make up this fantastical creature that nobody's really sure what it
right.
even is? But Ned, I just called him Kingsley. Ned believes in him, and he goes, "No, Steve." Like gives him the pep talks, like, "Let's
Right.
go do this."
Yeah, and yeah, in a certain light, maybe it's a little unfair to like try and shift the blame at the last minute by like from a
Sure.
screenwriting sense of being like we're gonna make him push it, but I think that like it's so tough to swallow
Well, and it's
that this
also much
happens.
lower
It's so
stakes.
senseless.
We didn't even talk about this. It's much lower stakes after the pirate raid and
Yeah,
the action movie rescue of the
right.
hostages on that island.
Yeah, another scene where you know that shows Steve's, you know, not that going around shooting people is good, and
But like he
certainly,
isn't completely incompetent. Like he kind of steps up again. Like he kind of becomes the Steve Zissou again.
well, he's protecting his people, which is very sympathetic. That part sympathetic. I was going to say, you know, watching it this time, not that one should be able, like, one should think enough to have these feelings without the personal connection, but certainly now that I'm married to a Filipino woman, I'm like, well, this like faceless group of Filipino pirates exists just to be shot and not given any other real characteristics. But that aside, you know, it is a moment of heroism from our ostensible hero that also, you know, shows care for people. And in this
And in
scene
that
with
instance, even care for his
yeah,
enemies. Like that scene where Jeff Goldblum looks up from the card table and is like, "Steve, are you here to rescue me?" Like that always makes me laugh. It's
well, I
Jeff
mean,
Goldblum. We haven't
and
even mentioned him. He is so good.
Steve has to think about it for a second. He's like,
Yeah.
"Am I here to?" All right, I may as well, you know,
Yeah.
kind of. But you know, in the helicopter, it's a small moment. It doesn't redeem him at all, but I love that as the helicopter's going down, Steve puts out an arm in front of Ned, embracing him for
Yes,
Crash.
where
Like, it does feel like the moment where he finally is like embracing being a father from the stance of, I am truly going to try and protect you rather than you are you are here to do something for me.
well, yeah, because there was this scene previously where they were underwater looking for one of the homing beacons, where Ned asks him, he goes, "Hey, this may be kind of weird, but can I call you Dad?" And he's like, like that instinct, but how about we find something else? How about we workshop it?" And then he also is
You
like
call me Steve
controlling
Z.
Steve Z. And like he controls the camera angle, and like you see both Steve's manipulation of like the perception of himself as like an adventurer, but then also the perception of himself relationally. Like he wants it, but he wants to kind of have it on his terms, like, and he
Yeah.
wants to be in control. He's not ready to kind of like embrace him. And in that final moment, after they read, they reread, they talked about the note that Ned wrote him when he was a little boy. And he named that little fly after Steve in Kentucky. Like he discovered a new species of fly, and he called it the Zissou fly. And the PS was something about like, "Don't you ever wish you could breathe underwater?" And that got the emotions going. Like I didn't quite start crying, but he goes, "I still wish I could breathe underwater." And Steve's like, "Me too, Ned." Like that's just such a
Yeah.
sweet moment.
Yeah, I mean, he learns, but very slowly. Um, I do want to. So I do want to talk about the jaguar shark
Okay.
encounter,
So yeah, right after the funeral, basically the homing beacon goes off, and that kind of launches that final expedition.
and I think that the thing that I mean there's obviously no one sort of answer for what this means. The thing that unlocked something for me this time was thinking about how Ned's death, like this is all kicked off with Esteban's death, his dear friend, and he's like, I have to kill this shark for revenge. And then it was just so ridiculous. But following Ned's death, like he is still grieving, but it feels like he's given up his need for control. Like
He
he
has.
like all of the anger has drained from him. He
Well, and
knows
they're
that
also
killing
all
this
there
shark.
together. They've got like 15 people in that sub. Like they are like a true team in that moment. Like they're
Yeah,
all in that one together.
yeah, but he he knows that killing the shark does nothing. Like
Yeah.
he has released that he doesn't want to kill this beautiful thing, and I also feel like there's something to the idea of like the shark is like represents death in a very literal sense, and he is now able to face it, and sort of his only one thought at that point is like, I wonder if I made a connection with the shark. I wonder if it remembers me. And then that's when all the people in the like reach out and touch him, and like they have made a connection, like the people
One of the most
with him.
beautiful lines of dialogue and just the perfect
Yeah.
delivery. So, I mean, and they even talked about in the commentary, they're like, this doesn't like mean a thing. Like that's why like it's art. Like it is kind of open a bit, but I kind of read it not fully, but it made me think it's kind of because recently, personally, one of my in the last month, one of my grandparents passed and one of my wife's grandparents passed. So we both did 2 funerals in the span of a couple of weeks actually. And there's something like Steve never really got to have closure. And also in the world of the film, plenty of people didn't even believe it happened. They thought he just made
Hmm.
it up as a reason not to finish his movie. And like another part of that on my train of thinking was like maybe in a way like bearing witness or kind of getting to like say goodbye to his friend in a way, and like just kind of have that moment, and then like that reaching out for recognition, like we shared that moment. Like I wonder if, because I mean this jaguar shark was just eating lunch and it happened to be Esteban,
Yeah.
but that was so important to Steve. And he's reaching out, he's like, oh, I wonder if it remembers me. And it's just like, oh
Well, my wife often talks about like her one of the things that is most important to her is like feeling seen, which is a thing that honestly, like, I didn't think about my life in that way, but I get it. I get like, oh, like you want the idea that something mattered. And one
yeah.
way is that like you have been witnessed, and so what you're saying I think makes a lot of sense from that perspective.
But I mean, yeah, just, and also just seeing like something bigger and more powerful than you. Like just
Yeah.
seeing like, whoa, this is a big, majestic creature. And also it's kind of silly. Like it's got like 3 fins and is like like dimensions are insane.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
the design
I
is
don't think
like
it's too
fantastical.
you don't have to have too much of a, a degree in literature to posit the idea like, oh, this shark is kind of in its goofy way like a god figure. Like you're
Sure.
going down into the inky blackness in
Yeah.
your little pod alone, coming to face a thing larger than you that you can't possibly understand, that has the power of death, you know.
Mhm.
And so of course there's some power in that image.
And then with the music and everybody in the sub, like a dozen plus people just all putting their hands on Steve as he
Yeah.
has his like first emotionally like he has release. Like he
Yeah.
starts crying because like he never gets to be not okay. Like he's clearly not okay, but he never gets to kind of like actually be not okay in the film. And that's when that happens for him. And he, like you said, he lets go of the pretense of revenge and
Yeah.
like he's like, no, like I'm connected to this thing. This thing is big. Like this is just a marvel. Like I want to be here and experience this. And like that's enough catharsis for what I need. And it's just so beautifully edited into then the documentary footage where Jane is having both Ned and Steve do the Zissou pose in the documentary, and Steve narrates something like, well, and this voyage also ended like we kind of like what you said, like the mirror image of like we lost another crew member, and also maybe my like and then the humor of like, and maybe my son and one of our shareholders, like, but it's all the tones together, and you see Cate Blanchett with the baby, and you see the whole team there, like getting their flowers, like getting the respect, like kind of being, and it's not all about their status, but like they're fulfilled, like they are kind of all doing the thing that they want to do well, and Steve's just kind of outside, finally not seeking the glory and the attention in his growth.
Yeah. And then
And
you get the Buckaroo Banzai ending.
you do. Well, and before that, I feel like I have had to have noticed this before, but it's not a detail I remembered. He wins. Like they win some sort of
Oh.
award and he just leaves it there on the ground. And he picks up little Werner for the the Buckaroo Banzai ending.
Yeah. Yeah. Werner, who earlier on gave him the little seahorse, and I guess I forgot to mention it, but I guess it's sort of a save the seahorse moment of like, instead of save the cat, this is what's going to make us think like, oh, maybe he's not such a bad guy.
Yeah, he
He gets
takes the
hit in the
glass.
face, but he takes the glass to save the animal. But yeah, you get the funny thing is like, I get the connection between this and Buckaroo Banzai in the sense that they're both sort of this arch version of a ridiculous sort of conglomeration of things that don't go together. Like a seagoing documentarian is not a pirate fighter, like these are,
Yeah.
but in the world of these sort of like pulp worlds,
Pulp,
sure.
yeah, like a pulp adventurer.
Yeah, but it's funny to me that even in Buckaroo Banzai, a movie I like very much, but is not an emotional movie in the same
No.
way that this is. Like the ending where they all walk through the LA River, together, like everyone sort of like joins them as they go. I find affecting on its own, like stripped of any reason why it should actually have that much emotion. That really works for me. And then put at the end of this movie, sort of an homage to that, where you really do care about all of who these people are and how they like peel on to the march to form a family. Like it's super moving.
Well, yeah, and if you're a movie person and you know that, like, as Jeff Goldblum joins them walking too, you're like, this is good. This is real good.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I
and the
wasn't even thinking of that, but that's true.
the one other moment that I really appreciated this time as well, listening to their commentary, like they stole this moment from reality. I forgot who they said it was, but when Jane is showing Steve, or like the aftermath of Jane showed Steve her article and is kind of getting his feedback on it. And he's a little prickly at first, but he's like, well, at first I really didn't like it, but then like I was like, I did say those things and I did do those things. So like, okay, like a little bit of like self-awareness. And
Yeah,
he's like,
that's me.
you do you, like letting go of the control of the image and also kind of accepting himself and just and seeing himself for who he is. Like not that like he
Yeah.
doesn't want to grow or whatever, but that he is able to see himself warts and all and be like, okay, like that's who I am right now. I'll allow it. Versus it was like, yeah, Ned, how about Steve Z? Or okay, guys, like frame it this way, do it this way. Like him kind of just embracing reality.
Yeah. No, that I mean, again, another, I don't know what it is about middle age specifically, but I've had more conversations recently than ever before about, sort of what it means to sort of honestly assess yourself or have to be forced into it, as the case may be. Like old coping mechanisms maybe don't work, and you got to figure out, like, oh, okay, maybe it's easier just to try and be better, than to like seem like you're better or whatever it is. And I think that spoke to me as well.
Yeah. So it's very strange, very peculiar, very potentially dissonant tonal movie, but one that really, really works for me. I love it a lot. Thanks for picking.
Oh, thank you. It was a great excuse to watch it again.
Oh, and also the soundtrack. I was listening to that a little bit too. All the Portuguese Bowie songs, man. What a
Yeah,
what a strangely inspired choice.
yeah. I Although I read that he was just sort of making up his own lyrics in Portuguese because he's like,
Yeah, they
I
wanted to
don't
do
need to.
Bowie, and they're like, "Well, he's gonna sing it. So, do you want to just kind of transpose them or translate them a little bit and kind of do your own riffs?" And they
Yeah,
somehow got the rights for it, and it's kind of this just interesting riff on something familiar but also new.
yeah. It's that's great. The more sort of traditional pop music uses are also great. I think that's the first time I really heard "Search and Destroy," a great song.
Yeah, no, Wes is always um he's always great with the use of the music and the needle drops, and they never feel like they're always very cinematic, but I feel like in the hands of somebody less talented, it would just be like ham-fisted and forcing it down your throat because like in some ways they're obvious with like the slow motion and the needle drop and the like this is trying to make you feel this way, but it just comes off as so earnest versus like blunt.
Yeah, I mean, there's a weird anti quote unquote needle drop thing on the internet. I'm like, well, what is that? Like, what does that honestly mean? Like,
Well, and why?
you know, that they put a song in to try and make you feel a feeling. Great. That's what I want out of a movie is to
Yeah.
have
That's why the camera moves. That's why they write the scripts that way. Like
images
they
and
are trying. Yeah.
sound. Give me emotion. Like I, you know, it only, I get it from the standpoint of like, these are like the most obvious, you know, songs one could use at this moment. But I dare say that, you know, Wes Anderson, if he ever does that, it's like once in a film where he's like, you know what? This was the best choice. You
And it
know, like
works.
we went through, we tried to do something obscure. We did like, but you know what? Sometimes you just gotta go with the thing that works.
Yep, play the hits. Yeah, I was a little. I loved the original song in Asteroid City. I was a little bummed that didn't get very much awards recognition. I love that alien song that the little kids sang in that movie. What did you think of Asteroid
Yeah.
City? That's the newest West. Well, actually, I guess there's the Netflix ones, but the newest feature.
I still haven't watched any of the Roald Dahl ones, and
Same.
I'm sure this is
Freaking
I
Netflix.
want to.
If they were in the theater, I would have seen them. But
That's
they
true.
dropped the
That's true.
same
I would
day
have.
as the same weekend as 30 other movies and 4 other full seasons of television, and they just got
Yes.
lost.
I think I would say that is the primary problem, and then the other one is probably familiar to anyone who is coupled out there, where it's like the other person wants to watch it too, but then it never seems to happen. So like you can't watch on your own. I mean, I just saw Civil War today because Audrey was finally like, you know what? Realistically, I'm not going to get out to the theater with you, so go ahead.
There you go. That's always
You know,
nice when that happens.
but Asteroid City, I have, while I think I like all of Wes Anderson's movies. Um, More in the last several have I been up and down on. Like I've liked them all, but like it hasn't been. I could point to a streak where I'm like, I love all of this, and you know,
Yes.
and then it sort of
I think up to Moonrise Kingdom, that one did not super click
that
with me in the
also
theater, and I
didn't
have not
click with
revisited it
me.
since.
No, I don't know.
I need
Like
to
a
give
lot
it
of
another
people
shot.
love that one,
Yeah,
so
I was like, I guess I missed it. I don't know.
yeah. But Asteroid City was one where I'm like, is this working for me? Is this not working for me? Like it, maybe I was thinking about whether it was working for me too hard. It like I was enjoying all of it, but I was like, is this going to give me sort of the moment of like I'm in tears that seems to happen with all of the best Wes Anderson movies? And I didn't quite get that, but I think that like at the end, you know, sort of the patented moment that it all comes together is very effective in that movie. It was also funny to watch because I wrote a spec TV pilot script that no one asked me to write and probably will never get made or seen. But but I wrote it for my own enjoyment, and it had a very similar like ultra nested structure to Asteroid City.
Interesting.
And then I saw
Before
it
you
in the theater,
saw
I'm like,
that,
oh, weird. Yeah.
interesting. No, it's not.
And
It's not at all. I wonder if it remembers me, but I really do love the Margot Robbie fire escape
yes.
sequence. That was, and like I had forgotten that Robbie was in the movie, and then that one scene, like there is that star power that really was there.
Yeah, I think it shares with Life Aquatic the same sort of like grasping towards meaning in a
Mhm.
like a really metaphysical way. I mean, it also has this sort of like looking toward a god figure to explain it all
Yep.
kind of end to it, and I think it'll grow for me if I rewatch it in a similar way. I think it's another one probably where I only kind of caught on to maybe thematically what it was
Well, there's
doing
so much. I've only seen it
later.
twice, but on the
Yeah.
rewatch, I liked it the first time. Rewatched, I liked it more, and I was like, in 3-4 years, this is gonna be like real high
Yeah.
for me. But
Yeah.
so would love to hear. I mean, we talk Wes Anderson. What have you been watching, reading, listening to? It doesn't have to be terribly deep and substantive. I mean, I love your podcast. Yours, I mean, I listen to way too many movie podcasts and like plenty of them. Like I know some of the people involved in them. It's like I got way too many in my key, but your guys is very smartly, and I don't know if it was intended this way. You guys are often my weekend housework and chores listening because it's dependable. It's on Saturday, so Saturday or Sunday when I'm doing work, that's usually my like I don't have to put a lot of brain power into it. It's not like we're deeply chopping this thing up. It's a lot of really great riffs and bits, and I'm a big like fan of that style. But you also talk about it too, and it's clear that you guys aren't just funny and comedians. Like you also, in addition to being funny, you also do really have a knowledge of and respect the form, even when it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I have grown as we've gone on, slightly more uncomfortable with like, oh man, we made this about making fun of other people's stuff.
Sure.
You know, like I am like, is this what I want my sort of vibe to be? Is that I'm like, I'm gonna tear down these things, but I comfort myself that I do think that we're all kind of nice about it. Like there are ways of
You
walking
guys
into
give good
doing.
bad movie out quite a bit because when it's good, it's
Yeah,
good. Like it doesn't have not everything has to be like I don't know The Godfather. Like you can still have like a fun fast food meal. Like not everything has to
yeah.
be like Michelin star dining.
Well, also, if you don't, even if you don't like it, like I think that there is a version of this show that could be us like walking in, looking for nits to pick, like assuming it's going to be bad from the beginning. And I think for the most part, we all walk in hoping against hope that this time we're going to enjoy the movie just because we like movies, you know. And I think that weirdly, the biggest bad movie fans are often the biggest movie fans
Yeah,
because, like,
because
number
like we've
one,
seen so much.
yeah, well, yes, there's that. Like that I think that's the main reason, honestly. Like we've seen so much that this will show us something that we haven't seen, and it's also sort of fascinating to take the clock apart and see like, well, okay, this didn't work and why. But also like obviously if you just kind of liked movies, you wouldn't waste
Yeah,
your time on bad movies. You would just, watch
yeah.
something
You'd
that
watch
you
like the
heard
two or
was
three
good.
like yeah. Yeah, last year I saw Oppenheimer. Like so many people who are not movie people saw Barbie and Oppenheimer and were part of that discussion, and it was exciting. And I was like, oh, people are
Yeah.
going to the movies. But yeah, most people aren't watching Ghoulies too.
And you know what? Go out and I mean that's not my recommendation. It's fun. It's it's for anyone who already has a fondness for say an 80s light horror movie where like little puppets terrorize people if
Well, and
if
it
that's your
paid
sort of
off on the
thing.
promise as I saw in your review. So I was like, oh, I do want to
Yeah.
see that of the original poster. So I
Yeah,
mean,
never gotten in the end.
what have you been really enjoying? What have albums, podcasts, movies, books? I know you're a comics guy. Like what have you been engaging with going like, that's good. Like I think people would enjoy that.
I'll give two recommendations. The first one is a movie that I had not even been aware existed until the Blank Check guys started sort of pushing it on their show a little bit, which is The Burial, and it's on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
It stars, get this, Jamie Foxx and Tommy Lee Jones.
Is
Uh,
this new or old or
it's new. It came. It was came out last year, maybe, or early this year. I don't. It played
okay?
the some sort of extremely limited theatrical release, but functionally, it just got dumped to Amazon Prime. And the fact that I hadn't heard of it, you hadn't heard, like, this is a movie with big awards-winning stars. It is a courtroom drama, but like a comedy drama with a
Oh,
lot
I
of like
think I
funny
saw like an
stuff.
image. I think I saw like a one sheet for that. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's what formerly would be known as a crowd pleaser if it got to be put in front of a crowd ever, but it didn't. And it's such a weird thing to me because like this is a movie that as recently as maybe like 10 or 15 years ago I feel like would be put into the theater. It was like a 30 million budget. It probably would end up making like 90 million in the theater or whatever, and maybe one of the leads would get a
I say
nomination
if
for
it's
the
a courtroom
Oscars.
drama, yeah, it's like a last quarter potential awards
Yeah,
deal.
like that's the thing about like I'm not selling it as a particularly brilliant movie, honestly, but I am selling it as like if you miss that sort of thing, like
I
this
have this
would have
conversation with
been
I miss
yeah.
mid-budget good movies. Like
This is a movie that in the old days would show up on TNT, and then over the course of like 15 years people would
yeah,
decide that this was like a classic and one of the
I
greatest.
love it because I've seen it in chunks 38 times.
Yeah. It's it's fun. Like it is funny, it's sweet. Social issues are lightly bumped against.
Well,
Your
Tommy Lee
intelligence
Jones
won't
isn't
be
always in front of the
insulted.
camera a ton either, so
Yeah.
that sounds exciting.
No, it's wild to me that it anyway. That's the world we're living in, but if you enjoy that kind of thing, if you're if you're old enough that you have started bemoaning the things that you don't see anymore, then, then this is the movie for you. And then I also wanted to recommend there's a listener to our show from way back, Kathy McLeod, who is also a comics artist. Stuart actually has a picture of the house cat, a tattoo that was off of one of her drawings. Um, and she's done like a strip here or there. Like I've never met her, but I've seen it from a distance because I'm like, oh, this is someone who listens. This is cool. Um, and she just put out a graphic novel called Continental Drifter that I read and really enjoyed. About it's like a graphic novel memoir about how she felt as someone half Thai, half American, and like the dynamics in her family, and then shuttling sort of back and forth and having summers in America. And I found it really sweet and comforting, sort of in that it speaks to, even if you're not in that specific situation, I don't know, being young and feeling like the odd person out and wondering if you're going to figure that out ever, I guess. And so I really enjoyed that.
Continental Drift, you said Kathy, what's the last name?
Uh, I think I think it's pronounced McLeod. It's like MacLeod.
Oh,
Is
okay.
how it's spelled.
I will look it up and make sure it's in the
Yeah.
show notes. Whenever I hear McCloud, I always get Mystery Science Theater flashbacks.
McLeod.
Yeah, Chief. Yeah. I'll say I just recently, I don't know what kind of rollout it's getting. I know here you're in New York, right?
Yeah.
In Kansas City, we have I've been here for a little over 10 years, and it was such a nice surprise. When I moved here, I did not know how cultured the Midwest was, particularly here. We have a great theater scene, so it is playing in a couple places. I don't know how long it's going to be in theaters. It is already on VOD. I hope it gets a physical release, but I just watched The Last Stop in Yuma County. Uh, really, really enjoyable. Have you seen that one? Or is that on your radar?
I I
Jim
haven't seen
Cummings?
this one. I kept getting confused with like there's a terrible movie that we did for the podcast that had a very similar title that I
I think
wish
I
I
know what
could
you're
remember.
talking
So
about. I can't pull it right now. No,
yeah,
this is brand new. This is unspecified time period, but neo noir. Like it's potentially modern ish. Um, bunch of people at a truck stop. The pumps are out of gas. There was a bank robbery, and all these people are getting packed into a diner, waiting for the gas tanker to come to fill up the gas station, so they can all fill up their cars up and leave. And the tension mounts, and it's just a real fun movie.
that sounds fantastic. I love a neo noir. I got to say this other title now that I found it because it is so similar, and I fear that it is just going to send your listeners to the wrong place because they're going to get confused too. But don't go for the one that's a neo noir and not a limp satire, which is what this is. It was called Breaking News in Yuba County.
Yeah,
Breaking
Yuba.
News
Yeah,
in
that was
Yuba
it.
County.
Yeah, not that one. The
So
Last Stop in Yuma County. It was very, very good. And then just the other day, because it's like the middle of the month, so a lot of times Hoopla gets updated. Support your local libraries, and Hoopla, support the show if you want sometime. I just saw that Hundreds of Beavers was added. If your Hoopla, your local library has Hoopla that has movies, Hundreds of Beavers was just added there. And I know they're still doing, like, talk to your local theater programmers if you have an actual local theater. They are extremely willing to work with folks, but now if you want to watch it at home legally, you can do it with a library card.
Oh, that's great. Even
Give them the
here
streams.
in New York City, as they said in salsa commercials of my youth, even here, like, it was hard to see. I saw Hundreds of Beavers. I had to go out to Syndicated Bar in Bushwick, which is not convenient for where I am, but I'm like, I gotta see this movie that everyone's talking about. I really enjoyed it. If anything, if I had any criticism, I was like, too much of a good thing. It was like so
It was
relentless.
a lot.
I'm like, oh my god.
But it was fun. No, we have
fun.
several incredible theaters here, but my theater of choice in the last month and a half, they both had Hundreds of Beavers and The People's Joker, which are two hard to see movies that were just such a great time to see with a packed theater of like actual movie people. Those two of my favorites this year.
Yeah. No, that one also very, very good. Very good.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time. I'll put it in the show notes, but obviously the Flophouse, do you have anything that you're working on currently or something that you want people to go back to that you're really proud of? Where do you want me to direct folks to? You've done a lot. I've done a lot of work.
Go to flophousepodcast.com. That's where the podcast lives. There's an events page that has, like, we do streaming shows, we do live shows around. I don't know otherwise. Like, you could watch old episodes of Jon Stewart's first run on The Daily Show and get me these 23-cent internet residuals. If you like artwork, I have an Instagram called Dan McCoy Draws. That is my only public Instagram, and it's just a bunch of drawings I do, or occasionally a painting. Excellent.
Well, I will put those in the show notes. Love listening to you weekly as I do my housework, and it was a real pleasure to talk to you about a very good movie.
Thank you for having me.
That was so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that. I know I had a wonderful time talking with Dan. That was wonderful. Before we get to final thoughts here, we actually have something that we haven't had in a little while. We have a listener VM. Listeners, if you want to get your voicemail on the show, you can record it on your phone and email it over to us at thesubstancepod@gmail.com. But we got a voicemail here from Nathan, so let's listen to that now.
Hello, Philip / the Substance Pod. This is Nathan, a longtime listener, first-time caller. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your episode on the movie Southern Comfort with the great Mitchell Beaupre. It finally got me to sit down and check it out. I don't think I've seen any Walter Hill movies either, so that's a journey I might do at some point. But man, I loved this movie. I really did. It's just like a masterclass in escalating tension. I thought a lot about Sorcerer, the William Friedkin movie, and one of my favorite directors, John McTiernan, someone who I've really come to appreciate in the last year. I don't know if you would consider him like a contemporary of Walter Hill's or not, but I think similarly, those two there's a lot of thought and intention into the way that these action sequences are constructed and the moments in between. It just feels like everything just feels thought through in a way that a lot of action films don't, if that makes any sense. Anyway, as far as like how the movie just feels relevant today, I think you guys did discuss that beautifully. There's nothing else I need to add. And lastly, I'll just say, Philip, I really enjoy the show. I love your movie episodes, but on the other ones where, you're discussing bigger, broader topics, I just think you approach it with a really degree of like humility and just a good faith that is missing from a lot of these discussions. So I know this podcast is a lot of work, but I appreciate the work that you do put into it because, these kind of discussions are needed, especially during this time, and especially, in the way that culture intersects with faith. I think you're doing a beautiful job. Okay, I'm looking at my timer here. I'm going almost 2 minutes. I apologize. Love the show. Have a great one. Bye.
Wow, thank you, Nathan. That was very encouraging. I appreciate that very much. I love doing the Substantive Cinema episodes, and I love doing the regular Substance episodes. And I know we have some people who only tune in for the movie ones, and we probably have some people who only tune in to our regular ones. But it's always nice to hear feedback like that, and I just really appreciate that. So thank you, Nathan. And I agree. It was wonderful to have Mitchell from Letterboxd back to talk Southern Comfort a few weeks ago. Always wonderful to have them on. Great movie, great conversation. But yeah, thank you very much, Nathan. So if you guys have any thoughts you want to share, feedback on particular episodes, let us know what you like. Let us know what you want to hear about in the future. You can send emails or voice notes to us again at thesubstancepod@gmail.com. Gonna have links in the show notes, obviously, for Dan's work over at the Flophouse, his art on Instagram, and his newsletter, things like that. Go check him out. He's somebody whose work has always made me smile, and hope you guys enjoy that as well. Like we said at the top, the best way to support the show is to tell others about it. If you've written an iTunes review, we thank you so much, or Apple Podcasts now, I guess. We thank you for that. That helps new people find out the show. But it also helps people find the show when you just send it to them, whether you share it on social media, text a friend. Who do you know who loves Wes Anderson? Think about the person that first pops into your head when you're like, who do you know who likes Wes Anderson? Send them the show. Say, hey, thought this was fun. Thought you might like it. Send them the show. That helps us out so much. If you have a couple of bucks, and I know it's the holiday time, so I'm not trying to guilt anybody here into supporting the show, but if you got a couple bucks, you like the show, if you want to just put something in the tip jar, you can find us at Cash App at $the Substance Pod. You can throw a few bucks there, or if you want to become a monthly supporter of the show, you can do that in the link in the show notes over at the Spotify. You can do that, I believe, for $1, $5, or $10 a month. It all helps. We are working on plans for the next year. Have some really cool episodes in the can. Got a lot of cool guests on the calendar. A lot of good substantive cinema, and some substance episodes with some new and returning, I was about to say faces, I guess voices, new and returning guests that I think you will all enjoy very much. So if you want to be a part of that, great. And we appreciate each and every one of you. There is a slight chance we have a new episode out next week, but it will probably be the 2-week cycle again here. So look forward to that in a couple weeks on your feed. I've been your host, Philip Marinello. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on The Substance.
No, my memory is so bad. I don't like it's.
I saw you semi-recently. You did Hundreds of Beavers, right?
Yes. I this is how I remember. I have to look at. This is why I keep such a.
I do love Letterboxd. It helps a lot with stuff like that.
Yeah.